Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, and today I'm hanging out with Robert Nerdarchy from Adventure League, the
Hello.
Adventures League, the community manager, and a bunch of other places as well.
Yeah.
All of which you can find in the description. Tons of links there. You, sir, are like all over the place when it comes to gaming and Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I try to be. I try to be. It's been great to be able to turn my love of social media and and D&D into a career.
Oh my God, someone in the chat just said they called in sick today so they could give this topic my undivided attention.
Wow. Wow. Thank you.
That's dedication.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll kick it off with, and we'll start with, what is Adventures League, in case someone watching this, has no idea, or maybe you're someone that wants to play Dungeons and Dragons and you haven't been able to find a group to play with.
Yeah, so that's exactly what D&D Adventures League is for, is to be able to help people find a game of D&D. And there's a variety of reasons that people can't find a game. They move to a new place, they just don't have time for a regular game. Just all of the multitude of reasons that people have in general. And we try to mitigate some of that by offering sort of an easy on-ramp to D&D. And we do that by having content available, like short content, usually anywhere between 1 and 4 hours in general, although there are some longer 8-hour adventures too. But so we try to have content that's easily runnable in a night, so that we have a lot of 1 and 2 hour adventures now. And so people can get those from the DMs Guild. They're very inexpensive, $2.99 for 5, or what is it, $2.99 for a 2-hour adventure, I think, and $3.99 or $4.99 for the 4-hour adventures, and then the 5 1-hour adventures. So there's a lot of content that people can get, and as a dungeon master, run quickly and easily, and as a player, play quickly and easily, in 1 or 2 hour slots. You can play all of these at home. You can play them at stores. You can play them at a club, conventions, basically anywhere you're playing D&D, you can play Adventures League. And one of the things it does, like I said, so like if you can't afford, or you can't get a regular group together, but you can have maybe, one or, a couple hours, either on a Saturday or on a Wednesday, depending when people are running it at stores, you can just drop in and play a game for a couple hours, and that can be it. There's no need for like a lot of home games have, where, you have to be there every week or whatever. These are kind of just drop-in games, so it makes it really easy for anybody to jump into D&D.
Now, and also too, I guess one of the concepts behind the design is for it to be kind of like any good franchise, right? No matter what Wawa or Burger King or McDonald's you go to, you can kind of expect to get the same experience, and or at least that's what you're going to shoot for. Obviously,
Yeah.
with something like D&D, it's going to be much more difficult, but I would think that was the goal.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it as well. So if you can only manage to get out, a couple times a month and get to your store or whatever, and play a game, you can also then, when the regional or local or even national, like big conventions like Gen Con or whatever come up, and you go to those events, they will likely have D&D Adventures League. And so you can take that character that you played in a home game, as long as that, the game is running by Adventures League rules, or a store or a convention, you can take that character anywhere to play him. And so it makes just transfer really easy. And like you said, having a sort of a common experience helps. And so we try to give a few, we try to give as little advice as we can about the D&D rules, but places where, it's very much up to the DM, a lot of times we'll give some advice, like, okay, if you're DM, run it this way, or use these rules. That way everyone's playing by the same rules. For example, in the player's handbook, it says you can roll 3d6 for your stats, or the 46, whatever it is. But we don't do that. We just do the point buy or the array. That way it's kind of even amongst everybody, and you can always expect the same thing of other characters. We also don't roll for hit points. We take the standard. And so that just lets everybody's characters be on the same level, sort of. And then for DMs as well, it's like, we ask DMs to kind of run the adventures more or less by the book. We still want them to have creativity and make sure you're running the game for your players, but also, if 2 groups of players play the same game and then play another game together, and they say, did you play this adventure? They can say, yeah. And they'll be able to say, well, we did this and we did this, and things will will seem familiar, basically.
Excellent. Yeah, I've played in one Adventure League game now and one Living World campaign for a different system. So I've got fairly limited experience with it as well. But we've always done homebrew, and the advantage of that is you get to kind of do your own thing, and you can have house rules.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like you said, you always have to be there. People are expected to show up, and you can't just drop into a home game and any day of the week pretty much and expect to have a game to play.
Right.
Where,
exactly.
Adventures Leagues, they're going on all over the place at all different times. So that part is really great for someone looking to get into it. And we always get that question, like, I want to start playing D&D. How do I do it? Where do I go? Mm-hmm. And this is definitely one of the places where we would point them is go to your local gaming store. And, hopefully they do have like an Adventures League game going on that they can drop into and get started.
Yeah, for sure. There's, and not only your conventions and your local stores and cons, but online, there's a huge community of both, on all of the virtual tabletops. They all have kind of Discord channels or, forums or whatever that people can find games. So there's literally always, Adventures League running online.
Frigginator 1369 there in Washington State has a question. How do you get started if you want to DM a home game of Adventure League?
So it's pretty easy. You can just go, assuming you already have D&D rules, get those one way or the other. If it's if it's the player's handbook, if it's D&D Beyond, Fantasy Grounds, like whatever you're using, make sure you have some rules, and then go to the DMs Guild and search for D&D Adventures League DMs pack. And if you just search for DMs pack, I think it'll come up. And that's basically the rules for DMing. And there's also a players pack that would be useful as a DM as well to read that stuff. So they're relatively short. We want them to be easy for people to jump into and not have a lot of extraneous rules. So do those, then get an adventure, and that can be any D&D adventure that's out there that's for 5th edition is D&D Adventures League legal. So any of the hardcover adventures are good, or you can go to DM's Guild and again get, just search for D&D Adventures League adventures and get any of those. If it has the logo, then it's usable. So find a group and then start running. As long as you're running the group by the Adventures League rules and players are tracking the rewards from the adventures, then you're basically running Adventures League game.
So I got a question for you for later. I'm going to set that one aside. Also, Frigginator asked about cost.
So there's no cost to our supplements. So the Adventures League DM's Guide and Player's Guide are free. And then, as I mentioned, our adventures run between $2.99 and $4.99. So they're very inexpensive.
There you go. So can you create, like, say, since he had asked a question about doing homebrew, or doing a home game for Adventures League. Now, all the Adventures League adventures themselves, do they all have to be approved?
Yeah. So we either write them ourselves. So anything that is part of a season. So usually, and they're marked with a code. So it's like DDAL. That's D&D Adventures League. And then the season number. So right now we're in season 7, which is Tomb of Annihilation, and then the adventures number. So if you see DDAL 71 and then the adventure name, that's us. We also have another program, however, for people that are aspiring to become writers for us or for D&D or RPGs in general, called the Created Content Program. And that allows conventions to sponsor a designer to write an adventure. And you can do that by going to the Adventures League website and looking at at our conventions page, and it has a link to the Created Content Program. And so that allows individual DMs to write an adventure for a convention. And usually we'll give like 1 to 3 adventures to a convention to write. They give us what they want to write, actually, like basically a blurb and an outline, and then Bill Benham, our resource manager, he will kind of work with the conventions and the designers to get those adventures written. And then eventually, after they premiere at the convention, the convention can use that content to like leverage other content from other conventions. So what's happening is they're getting a convention, or they're getting some content written for them, and then they trade it with other conventions so they can have more content. And then eventually those can go on the DMs Guild, and usually, depending on how the author and the convention work out a contract, they can get paid from the DMs Guild or what have you. And those are official Adventures League adventures as well.
So excellent. So now that basically kind of like covers Adventures League in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. So let's get into the seasons. And sure. We are in season 7 right now. How long is the season, and what determines that length?
So Wizards determines the length, and it varies really. For the first couple of years, we were doing kind of 2 seasons a year. But this season is a departure from what we've done in the past, in that we just started this season this month, and it's going to go through summer of next year, which is going to be our longest season. And so Wizards is just, they're kind of refining what they do. And so, their idea at first was to put out 2 a year. And then they're now deciding, well, maybe we want those to be a little bit longer. So now they're like, this time we're going to try a whole year. So it's just Wizards, Wizards marketing and their product timing and all that kind of stuff that changes the seasons. And so each season is with goes with an adventure. So the first season was Tyranny of Dragons, and it had Rise of Tiamat and Horde of the Dragon Queen adventures. The next one was the Elemental Evil, which had Princes of the Apocalypse. And then we had Out of the Abyss and the Rage of Demons and Curse of Strahd. And so there's also, those first couple of seasons, the season name was different than the adventure name. But then with Curse of Strahd, we married those together. So it was the Curse of Strahd season and the Curse of Strahd adventure, and then the Tales from the Yawning Portal, Storm King's Thunder, and Tomb of Annihilation. So those are all the seasons we've had so far.
So Tales from the Yawning Portal, that season seems really short. Is that accurate?
It was a short season, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was just from outside looking in. I'm like, I don't know, between Yawning Portal and Tomb of Annihilation, there wasn't that much time.
Yeah, and I mean, we also we pushed our Adventures League stuff. Like, we only released 6 adventures, 3 adventures, and 3 epics for that season, because we really wanted dungeon masters and players to play the content from the book, because there's 7 adventures in there. So that's really what we were pushing with that.
So Zarif Gaming has a really long question here for you, and it evolves around player rotation, and I think he's looking for suggestions on how to deal with it. And he kind of uses his example of like a characters coming into like Tomb of Annihilation, and they have a ton of cash, and they're able to like dump that into the ecosystem and buy up a bunch of dinosaurs to kind of like drive before them, or using creative ways that players will. I've seen goats, pigs, and cats used, but not dinosaurs.
Yeah. So a lot of what makes D&D Adventures League is are the DMs, and we still rely heavily on DMs to use their judgment running a game. And so like if characters like I have 500 dinosaurs as a herd. It's like, well, it just depends on what the adventure is. Like, is that even feasible to get 500 dinosaurs? Like, where did you buy them, and why are they here in the middle of the jungle now? Like, it's just, it's up to the DM to keep the game feasible, to keep it, not, realistic, to keep it fun for all the players. So if having all of that is not going to be fun, then maybe just ask the player, like, I don't think this is going to be that this is going to help this game, so please leave them in a stable somewhere or whatever.
And that's funny too, because like we deal with those types of questions all the time, and it's like, how do you get person X to do this, right? And you just really kind of summed it up right there. Just talking to people is like the best way to kind of get results in life in general, really.
Right.
Instead of going, having this like convoluted way of doing it. But so essentially DM rotation is going to be handled by the individual DMs and how they see fit. Now, and I guess the tip to take away from you is, basically just talking to your players, and like if if you feel like they're trying to do something that is going to take away from the fun of the game or just isn't feasible, just talk to them about it.
Right. We have a phrase called DM empowerment, and I think it comes from previous editions, third edition and fourth edition, where a lot of the mechanical power kind of went to players, and like if it says you can do a thing, then you can do a thing, and like DMs have to deal with that. Like that's sort of how it was. And so we have a saying called DM empowerment, where we are empowering the DMs to change the game to make it challenging still. So even if you're playing an adventure and you do have a player that says they want their herd of ankylosaurs or whatever, and you as a DM, you do have the right to say, well, maybe you don't want to do that. But then if you want, as a DM, say, okay, that's fine. It's this adventure is in a wide open plain, and maybe that would be useful and it would be fun. So you say, okay, but you're also empowered to like make that challenge harder. So if they're supposed to be fighting all these, if they're supposed to be fighting a certain things and the ankylosaurs are going to help them, then just make that fight harder so that player can still have what they want and something interesting, but it's still a challenge to the group. So a lot of people will come in with shield guardians have been given out a couple times in some of the adventures, and they make a character very powerful and very difficult to kill. And so a lot of DMs make the fights that include a shield guardian harder. A lot of them will split XP because the shield guardian counts as another character. Like there's a lot of things that a DM can do to still make the game challenging, regardless of what players have for resources.
Excellent. So how much notice do you guys get between seasons?
We have meetings with Wizards of the Coast at different conventions, or they'll fly us out to Seattle to have a meeting for a weekend or whatever. And so we usually know a couple of seasons ahead of time what they're going to be. Now that usually doesn't give us a whole, like, it kind of lets us plan our season a little bit. And then we'll get drafts. Like we're in all the admins are on the Wizards playtest list, so we'll get drafts of content, and we'll start making our narrative based off of their narrative, the draft, and then we'll tweak it as we need to, and we send those into Wizards so they can approve them, of course. And so we generally work about a year ahead of time, 9 months maybe, as we start working our narrative together, and then start getting stuff out to our designers to work on.
Nice. That's not too bad. So when you sit down to an Adventures League table, though, like depending on the adventure being run, like there's always like a level range. Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the things we do is, we have 4 different tiers, which are just the same that are in the player's handbook. So we reward people that are going to spend time in our program by requiring them to have a character that they brought up during play. So there are some exceptions to that, but we really want to encourage people to play. So if you want to play those cool high-level games where you're kind of saving the world and stuff like that, you have to have played the lower level stuff to bring your character up. Now, the exceptions to that is we have a program called DM Quests, and it's basically achievement awards for DMs. So DMs get a certain amount of rewards just for running games. But if you also participate in these quests and finish them, different quests, you get different rewards. Some of them are maybe magic items for your characters, bonus XP for your characters, special options to play things that most players can't play. For example, this season, we have a quest where if you run all the content, you can take the Death Domain, which is the domain for a cleric that's in the DM's Guild or DM's the Dungeon Master's Guide. That's not normally available for players in Adventurers League to choose. Like you get something special like that.
So they get rewarded by encouraging them to be jerks in the game.
No, it's running the content. We're not rewarding them for like killing characters or anything like that.
No. I understand that.
You're saying as playing as a Death Domain?
Yeah.
Well, so the way they first came out was that you had to be a cleric of Kelemvor, which was basically Kelemvor in Faerun is a death god, but he's like the neutral god or whatever. So, but with the new one that we have, you do have to be evil, but you can play evil characters anyway in Adventurers League. if you're part of the Zentarum or Lord's Alliance factions.
That gets to a whole nother thing. We actually just dropped the video today on Dark Heroes. And ultimately at our table, we generally want people to play neutral to good characters and be heroes.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely run into a lot of players playing jerk Dark Heroes, but there are some players that play them really well, actually, and those players are really fun. Like, you'll get the player that's like playing a necromancer, and so he knows he's evil and he has all these zombies, but he like puts them in armor or whatever, and like, like, so they have helmets on so you can't tell they're zombies. Or like, people that do stuff like that really think about the characters. I think it makes it more fun.
What's that smell?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's generally a running joke with that character. Yeah.
I can't get rid of these horse flies.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I always fight with people about the concept of the good necromancer.
Yeah.
Although 5e is hampering my argument, because in previous editions it was literally just negative energy.
Yeah.
To do that kind of stuff. So it's like, negative energy is bad.
Yeah, negative is bad.
So we've had 7 seasons. Do you have a favorite?
Without sounding just like towing the party line, Tomb of Annihilation, the new one, is my favorite so far. It's got the coolest aesthetic. Like, I really like the sort of primitive looking stuff, and so the Tomb of Annihilation, is kind of like that, got that Lost World thing. I mean, Dark Sun is my favorite setting, so this kind of touches closest to it, I think, as far as like primitive style. So I really like that. So far this is definitely my favorite, and I'm excited to run the adventure.
Yeah, I must say, like, of the products I've gotten so far, Out of the Abyss and Tomb of Annihilation have the most stuff that I want to cherry pick and add to my game. Like, Out of the Abyss, if you're running an Underdark campaign, that's an awesome resource. There's tons of information in there that you can use, even if you don't want to run that adventure. And who doesn't like demon lords?
Right.
But again, Tomb of Annihilation has a bunch of cool monsters in there, and it also introduces a bunch of cool things. In the sidebars, there was quite a few things. If you're picking through, and more dinosaurs, the whole dinosaur racing and betting section is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
If you want more survival stuff to add into your game, you also that stuff is in there. Plus a couple some more mundane equipment. And then it has like the fruits and different things like that as well.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like you're towing the line on this one. Tomb of Annihilation just adds a lot more to the game.
Yeah. And I love the exploration aspects. I think that's another favorite part of my game. And so since it's the jungle and there's all these ruins, I love that aspect of D&D. And so this includes a ton of that.
Sweet. So our editor, Doug, had asked a question earlier. He wants to know when there's going to be Bone, Stone, and Obsidian episode 3. And also, I guess you might as well tell people what that is in case they haven't checked that out yet.
Sure. So I'm a giant Dark Sun fan. Love all the stuff you guys have been putting out on Dark Sun, by the way. And so I'm a huge fan. And so I'd done a couple of podcasts with Wayne Chang, who was doing Advantage to Insight. So it was a 5th edition podcast. And although they started talking about settings, and people were asking about settings, and so he came to me wanting to talk about the Dark Sun setting, and he had other people doing Planescape and Ravenloft and all the other sort of 2nd edition settings that were really popular, but also Eberron and various other things, and the Dark Sun podcast was very popular on their network. And so I said, do you want to do a podcast? And he said, yeah. And I was like, cool. So I was like, as long as I don't have to do any of the back end stuff, as long as I just have to talk about Dark Sun and come up with topics and all that stuff, I'll do it. And so we've been trying to do that. We both had a hard month last month, and so we weren't able to record, but we should be recording. I think we're supposed to be recorded this week or next week. And so we'll have another episode. And it's talking about Dark Sun. And we try to do, since, if you really want to get the basics of Dark Sun, go search for Advantage to Insight and Dark Sun. And I think we did 4 podcasts, and that's kind of the basics. And then this podcast, we kind of choose one topic and dive into it. So the first one was Templars. The second one was survival, and then the third one is going to be about races. The kind of classic races and how they're changed in Dark Sun.
Yeah, we've got a handful of videos out, and we're gonna do, probably we'll do at least 10. Although I'm sure we get tons of stuff wrong and misremember stuff. Dark Sun was a
Yeah,
long time
we
ago.
all do. Yeah, even in the survival episode that we put out, someone was like, "Oh, you screwed this up," and it's like, yeah, it's like, a lot of the stuff I probably should research a little bit more, because yeah, my memory of stuff 20 years ago is probably off a little bit.
Yeah, we try and like grab a quick overview or whatever. Well, a lot of our videos are like that because they're discussions. They're not. It's not. Yeah, maybe occasionally we'll do some bullet points that we want to hit, but for the most part, they're just discussions.
Yeah.
So we're remembering things, and they love to point that stuff out in the comments.
Yeah.
Talk about.
Yep.
But that's quite all right. So what is the draw? What is the appeal of Dark Sun to you personally?
So Dark Sun's, I think the biggest thing, there was a couple of factors. One was that it came out the same year that I started DMing AD&D. So it was high school, freshman year, and our friends, we'd all played kind of basic D&D, and we wanted to get into AD&D, and so we got into AD&D, started playing that, and then all right around that time, all of these settings were coming out, and so like everybody in my group, we were all luckily DMs and players, so everybody kind of picked their own setting. Like one player picked Planescape, another Ravenloft, Dragonlance, and so on. And I chose Dark Sun because it was just coming out, it was just starting to DM. And the other thing was that, so sort of happened chance in that aspect, but also I lived in Arizona, I lived in Phoenix. And so my life, I had only known the desert, right? We would go camping up to the mountains now and again, but pretty much the desert. And so when you read all these D&E books, you're talking about, traveling along the forest and in the mountains. And I'm like, I don't know what a forest really is. Like, I really didn't know. And so, but when they said, in Dark Sun, traveling across the wastelands and boulder fields and scrub plains, like I knew what all of those things were. When I could see, when they showed pictures and described it, I was like, oh yeah, I know where that is. Like I could go to that today. And so just having a lot of that, really made it easy for me to run. And then I love, post-apocalyptic stuff. Always loved Mad Max and whatnot. And so it kind of all fits together. It was the 90s, and there was like a lot of eco kind of stuff going on, and the whole, a lot of the themes revolved around that. And so it's just all of it interests me. So that's kind of what drew me in.
Can we just say there's like one word to sum up Dark Sun too?
Yeah.
Brahm,
definitely. Oh yeah, I mean, his art is just amazing. Yeah, definitely my favorite artist in the world is Gerald Brom. Definitely.
Yeah. So I mean, I want to say like the top two most iconic settings when it comes to art, and it's really tough between the two. I'd be hard pressed to choose, and that is Dark Sun and Planescape.
Yeah, Dietrich Elysian Planescape was amazing. He did the Elves of Athos book for Dark Sun too. So he drew a bunch of elves for Dark Sun, and they're awesome.
Oh, you know what? I don't know if I've seen that or not.
Yeah. He did this awesome map with like drawings of the major tribes. It's fantastic.
I can only imagine it is. I love his work. My brother is a huge fan of his work. Oh, both of those guys. But yeah, and art. Art really. Don't forget Ebron. Well, you know what? Ebron's art is really good and amazing, but it's not. I wouldn't call it like iconic the way Planescape and Dark Sun is. Like they just have a style and a feel to their own that, in some ways, doesn't even feel like D&D art. It's
both of those settings had the good fortune of having one primary artist and like a secondary artist, but that was mostly it, and that really, guided and branded those settings, where Eberron has a bunch of different great artists that go with it. And if you see art, you might be able to tell it's Eberron, but I mean, if you see art in D&D that's Brom, you pretty much assume it's Dark Sun, or Dietrich Elysian with Planescape.
Yeah, there's definitely some spots where it could be like Spelljammer or Eberron.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Where you look at a piece from, you look at it like a generic piece from Planescape or Dark Sun, and you just like you can probably pick that one out.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few times, like I know Braum has done some stuff like that was used in Dragonlance. But if you look at it, you're like, that could still definitely be Dark Sun. You know,
Yeah.
it's just that style.
He doesn't know how to not Braum.
Yeah, right. Totally.
So we are about halfway through. So I want to start the roll call. And then also, are you running any Dark Sun? Are you doing any 5e Dark Sun?
I am. So I've got a home Dark Sun game, and that's like every other week. And then I've got an online Dark Sun game that I run through my Patreon, and both of those are 5e.
Oh, awesome. So also, guys, tomorrow I will have Adam Bradford on from D&D Beyond, and we will be giving away a legendary package of that, which I was really surprised when they offered that up, but that's a pretty sweet giveaway. So you are going to want to tune in tomorrow. So we're going to pick someone from the chat when we do that.
You know, just mentioning that, I would like to give away a seat at one of my Patreon games to one of your listeners. So however you want to determine that, I have a lot of different games on my Patreon. So I have the Dark Sun games. I have a Yawning Portal Adventures League game. I have, and then I run a number of my author-only adventures, which range from, you know, first level. So even if you don't have an Adventures League character, you can make one and play it up to 17th level. And so I would like to give a seat away to one of your listeners.
Oh, awesome. So I'm just thinking real quick of how to give that away, just because of it sounds like you have a bunch of different games going on there, right?
I do, yeah. And I'm about to start a Tomb of Annihilation game probably next month as well.
Okay. So we'll get into the roll call, and then we'll figure out how we're going to give that away.
Okay.
I'm going to have to come up with a method for this, because all of a sudden people want to give away stuff on the live chat.
Yeah, it's probably kind of hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So yesterday we literally, I just like randomly scrolled around. It was very, very low tech, and had Ted say stop, and wherever it landed.
Nice.
So we have Poison from Kuwait. We have Doug in Cleveland. Zarev Gaming, I think, is in New Mexico, even though it's not listed right there. So Kelsey is in Houston. We have Norway with Thomas. Todd is in Dallas. Eridaz in Houston. Tesmic in Australia. Regilio in Utah.
We have to 1 second just to go back. Zaref says he said he's from Ruidoso, New Mexico. So I met my wife in Ruidoso, New Mexico. It's a little town. We were both wilderness therapy instructors. We both just started working together randomly, and yeah, now we're married and have a couple of kids from meeting in this little tiny town in New Mexico.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had just seen his name in the chat at the top of the roll call before he said anything. I just he shows up to all these things, so I actually just know where he's from now. Nice. There's a handful of people like that, and it's really cool because I have a horrible memory, and if I actually remember where you're from, that means you're here a lot. Nice. So we got Bob Smith in Ohio. Frigginator is in Washington. We got Pokemon for What is in Canada. We got Kyle in British Columbia. Evil Silly Putty in Minnesota. Tampa, Florida Tampa, Florida. We have Jose. We have Silver-Sided Squirrel in British Columbia as well. We have Lincoln in Sweden. Lavoyer in California. Satori Shin is in California as well. And we jumped. We've got Pod 6 Podcast is in a galaxy far, far away, South Carolina. We've got more California with Sean. We've got Finland in the house with Frost Wolfpack. Nice. We've got Brian F. in New York City. Washington State with Ghetto Boy Pez. We've got Ranger Rory with Missouri. Sean, Washington. We got Essex, England with Aaron. We got Aruba with PMK 108.
Wow.
I think that might be a new one.
New one, yeah, nice.
Which is always welcome. GM Sub-Zero is in Baltimore. And that's what we got for now, which is awesome with people all over the place. Yeah. Always love the internationals. So I think what I'm going to do, if you guys want to play with Robert and get one of his seats from his Patreon game, just just type game in the chat, and we'll see who's interested, and from there we will randomly figure out a way to select someone. The only reason I say that is just because of like the international people and different times, and
I've had plenty of international people in my Patreon. One regular one is from Australia, and another regular is in Russia. And so, they are awesome and dedicated, and the Russian guy stays up all night to play. So a couple times he's fallen asleep, and so it's like, are you jumping in the game? And then he doesn't come. It's like, okay, he fell asleep. But I mean, it's like 4:00 in the morning when we're trying to play. And so, it's awesome. There's people from all over.
That is definitely cool. And that's like the great part about Friggin' game, but I don't have an AL character. I'm sure that this is something we can resolve and figure out.
Yeah, so like I said, the Dark Sun game is not AL, so if you want to jump in that game for a session, you could do that. And some of my adventures are first level characters too, so we can have easily get you a first level character.
Like I said, easily solvable problem.
Yeah. Cool.
So, all right. So right now I'm calling it. We've got a bunch of games in there. I guess roll me a D12 if you got one handy, Robert. If not, I do.
I do somewhere back here. Oh, look. I happen to have the new Tomb Annihilation dice right there.
Score.
D12. There we go. Oh, number 1.
Oh, number 1. All right. It makes it easy.
Yeah. Who's the first one?
That is Zareth Gaming.
Oh, nice. Nice. We'll talk about Ryudosa.
Nice. So the Zareth Gaming, just email me and I will forward you on to Robert.
Cool.
Now, the Tomb of Annihilation dice, I've seen getting a lot of flack online.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about it? To be honest with you, I ordered them, but I didn't order them for the dice.
I didn't have any. I wasn't gonna get them. Wizards sent me one. I just have a million dice sets, so I was like, I don't need another one. And I like the matte finish. I kind of wish it would have given. I kind of wish they would have given 2d20. You roll advantage a lot more than I'm rolling like percentage.
Right.
So I kind of wish that. And I understand some people don't like the kind of lime colored D20. But it seems fine to me. They seem nice, but I could see why people, the advertising didn't quite look the same. Looked a little bit different, but I think they're fine dice.
Like I said, I didn't order them for the dice. I ordered for the tin. Yeah,
the tin is cool, definitely.
Yeah. So I figured the extra set of dice is a bonus.
Yeah. What I really love, I don't think mine's somewhere further away, is the new DM screen. The new DM screen is amazing. The art on it is fantastic. I love that piece of art. And then what's on the inside is perfect. It's everything you need to run the game.
I think it's a much better DM screen as far as the interior information. Mm-hmm. Now I know Ted likes the. We actually did a fairly in-depth side-by-side of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Ted likes the art on the previous one better, but on the inside, I think we both agree that there's more useful information for a DM.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And then my only complaint is I wish they would have put like numbers near the size chart.
Numbers? What do you mean?
So on the interior,
mm-hmm.
they have the picture of all the different sized monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look, there's like a meter bar next to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wish they would have put numbers, their intervals or something,
mm-hmm.
instead of having to count hashes or kind of like eyeball it. So I think that, like, for me, like, I could actually just look at the monsters and I know roughly the size of them because I've experienced. Right. But a new GMs, might not know that. They, mm-hmm. They may not know, that a sturge is only about 18 inches.
Yeah.
you know, and a small humanoid's about 3 foot.
Right.
So I just feel like they would have did like 3 foot increments or something. That would have been like useful to a newer GM.
Mm-hmm.
Just because like you're describing things sometimes, and people will ask how big is it, or you want to include it in your description.
Right.
And if all you have in front of you is the monster size category, then it kind of gives you a rough. But
right.
I don't know. It was just my 2 cents. Wizards didn't ask me though.
Yeah.
Zareth Gaming, unless it's a Sturge on steroids.
Yes.
So how many you just rambled off a bunch of games. So how many games are you playing a week?
A week, it's usually just like about 2 right now. So my Dark Sun home game is, or no, I guess it's 3. My Dark Sun home game is every other week. The Yawning Portal game is every other week. And then the Dark Sun online game was every other week, but we're going to go down to once a month. The new Tomb of Annihilation game, the one that it's already full, is going to run once a month. And then I'm going to add another one. And then I run 4 games over the weekends, although it's usually two or 3 during a single weekend. So some weekends it's like 5 games. Some weekends it's 2, just depends on the schedules. But yeah, it's a lot. It's quite a bit of running.
So do you use well, obviously for anything that's Adventure League, you have to use that stuff. But do you like using pre-planned adventures or homebrew better? Do you have a preference?
It kind of depends on the campaign.
Are you allowed to answer this question?
No, yeah. I mean, I run a lot of, the Adventures League stuff is obviously all Adventures League. And even the Yawning Portal game is Adventures League because that's how I advertise it at first. But the Tomb of Annihilation game that's going to come up, that's going to be non-Adventures League. But I'll probably also run an Adventures League one too. My Dark Sun games, obviously they're non-Adventures League. And so I just make up everything. We just make up everything we need to for that because there's nothing for Dark Sun. So I just use just my own thoughts mostly. But also if people pull stuff from the internet, we'll use that too.
Yeah, I kind of feel like well, AD&D is like really easy to convert to 5e anyway.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, for Dark Sun, I use the characters are traveling around. So I just played Dark Sun last night on Fantasy Grounds, and so they're walking around in the desert, and so I have my Dark Sun Monsters Compendium here. And so I told one of the players, I'd rolled some dice and it's like, oh, there's a random encounter. So I just asked them, what'd you, somebody roll me 2d12. So they rolled 2d12. And then I'm like, okay, roll me another d6 or d12. And so then this monster came up and I was like, it's like a giant, it kind of looks like it's called a Kathrang. It's a giant turtle with these tubes off its back that will shoot this sticky stuff and like pull things in. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do this? How am I going to create this creature? And I was like, what other creatures have this, have that same sort of thing that have like tentacles or something? And I was like, oh, the group in my Yawning Portal game just fought a Roper. And I was like, perfect. So I, just looked up Roper real quick, transferred it over, basically copied everything over with it, just with the drag and Fantasy Grounds. So it made a new NPC and I just changed the name of it to Kathrang. Looked at it, I was like, oh, these stats are perfect. It's got tentacles, it's got a bite, it does everything, it's got a high AC. I was like, boom, that's what they're fighting. It's a Kathrang now, not a Roper.
Yeah, people get really wrapped up on that stuff and I think they overthink it. And I'm really big for just describing a monster different and just using that stats from something that already exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're getting questions about the weapons on the wall behind you.
Yeah. I saw some of those. So they're actually not Klingon weapons, although I guess it could be, but I just found them at some fantasy shop that had all kinds of mystical stuff in it, and they were just really cool. And so my mom bought them for me for Christmas one year.
That is an awesome mom.
Yeah.
Have some sharp fantasy pointy things.
Yeah.
So I actually have a question for you for my game.
Sure.
And the chat can weigh in too. So I've given a character I've enchanted their glaive, but I haven't told them what it is yet.
Mm-hmm.
And basically after killing a bunch of veggie pygmies, it became enchanted with I want to say like nature, some kind of nature magic.
Yeah.
So do you think making it +1 and giving it a snaring strike effect at DC 12 will be overbalancing?
What levels are the characters?
11th.
No, not at all. I mean, it's +1, so that's kind of that's under where we kind of do +1 is tier 1, +2 is tier 2, +3 is tier 3, so that's level 11. So I would say that's actually underpowered. And I guess it also depends on the ensnaring strike, like how often is that? Is it with every hit?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Every hit. That
Okay.
was the thing that was a little.
So yeah, that might depending on what exactly that does, that might balance it out.
So ensnaring strike is DC 12 strength save, or you're restrained, and every round you're restrained, you take a D6 damage until you save.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Although by 11th level, it's a what kind of save?
I made DC 12. I made it low intentionally.
What kind? A deck save or?
Oh, strength. Sorry.
Strength save. Okay. So I mean that's pretty low, and by that time, a lot of things will have higher saves. Obviously, anything that's really strong is going to make that really easily, but for weaker stuff, it could work.
Well, yeah. So I'll play around with it and see how bad it is for mages and spellcasters that come across.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And if it was a weapon without reach too, I would definitely not even think about it, because Glaive already has reach.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see, but they don't have many magic items anyway. I'm fairly stingy as a GM.
That's good. That's how I think it should be. I feel like people kind of got used to it, a lot of magic items in previous editions, and then also even with Storm King's Thunder, like they gave out way too many magic items in Storm King's Thunder, so like people have that that idea of really magic heavy characters, and then now with Tomb of Annihilation, DMs are looking through it and they're like, there's not that many magic items in here. But they actually asked us, because we complained, Adventures League, we complained to Wizards and we're like, there's too many magic items in Storm King's Thunder, it's insane. And so they're like, okay, can you review the magic items then that are in Tomb of Annihilation? And so I went through, I created a spreadsheet. I calculated at every point where the adventure, not every point, but at each kind of level band, how many magic items on average characters will have, given the magic item tables in the DMs, in the DMG, based off of how many monsters they should be fighting, all that stuff. It was a huge spreadsheet. And then I compared it to what was actually in Tomb of Annihilation, and it matched up pretty evenly. So I feel confident that the magic items there are kind of what characters should have according to the DMG rules.
I feel really good too about this incarnation of Watts, the way that they kind of keep going back to the community for input, and really have kind of like given over ownership to this edition.
Yeah, definitely.
Were you involved with encounters at all?
No, not really. I really was not into organized play until I started with Adventures League. I did a little bit with Ashes of Athos, which was Baldman Games Dark Sun organized play. And so I wrote an adventure there and did a lot of play testing for them, but that was my first real step into organized play.
Okay, cool. So you're actually fairly new to it as well.
Yeah.
Was that much of an adjustment for you?
Yeah, because I was used to home play, and so having to really understand what organized play was the adjustment. And so really understanding, like, we're not just a game, we're like a bunch of things to a bunch of different people. Like, how do you find a game? How do you learn to DM? So like Adventures League is, we have a lot of aspects, and to meet those aspects with all of the community is difficult. And so that's kind of the biggest thing to me. It's not just, you're not just playing a home game. You have to understand how, to have these general rules so that everybody has a similar experience, is really the core of it.
And also, before we go, I want to make sure people are aware that in the description, you'll find a link to an Adventure League Kickstarter. So do you want to go over that real quick? Sure. And let people know what's going on there?
Yeah. So as as an admin of the Adventurers League, we're allowed to create these things called author only. So before I told you about, we had the created content where people could create content as well. Well, as an admin, we can create author only adventures. So these are adventures that only the 6 of us admins can create. In addition, anybody that works at Wizards on the D&D team can create these as well. So like Jeremy Crawford, Mike Merles, Chris Perkins, and Chris Lindsay, they've all done them. And so like if you play a game of D&D at a convention with them or with us, they're generally these author only adventures, and they're kind of they're used as a way so that conventions will bring us out and have a reason to bring us out. And some of them are eventually released to the DMs Guild, but most of them have not yet been. And so PAX Unplugged is a new convention that's coming out in November. And it's like the other PAXs, run by Penny Arcade, except for this one is unplugged. So it's all about board games and role-playing games. So tabletop games, and I'm sure card games and stuff too. And so the PAXs have been, they don't charge for tickets. And so it's kind of been hard to get a lot of Adventurers League at the PAXs, but they're letting the group, the Roll Initiative, which is the group that's organizing the D&D at PAX Unplugged, they're letting them do a Kickstarter with limited kind of pre-registration for games there. And so if they reach their goal, I'm a stretch goal basically. So once they reach $6,000, then they'll fly me out, and I'll be able to run my author only adventures for them.
And also, they don't charge for tickets. Can you
Right.
clarify on that a little bit?
So in general, PAX does not charge for, they don't like to charge for individual events. So what this there's still a charge for the convention as a whole. So you still have a badge fee. You still have individual event tickets, fees. What PAX Unplugged is doing is all of the events that D&D runs, they generally cost money, in that either the organizer has to buy the adventure or the dungeon master has to buy the adventure. If we do things called like Phi Trends Trading Post, which is a way that people can trade magic items and get cool things like dinosaurs or different magic items and scrolls and stuff like that. And all of that costs money to print, right? Like Adventurers League gives it to conventions for free, but they still have to print it, and that's that there's a cost there. So there is some cost to running D&D, and so they're trying to kind of mitigate that cost while still staying within the PAX framework of not charging for events. And so they only have a limited number of kind of pre-registration, and that's what most of these are for.
Is Adventure League considered like a nonprofit?
No, we're part of Wizards of the Coast.
Okay. So Adventure League is basically owned by Wizards of the Coast?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're part of the D&D team.
Okay, awesome. I was just curious to like what the relationship was and if it was a partnership or if you guys were directly on there. And you said there's 6 admins?
Yes. Yeah. So when 5th edition was just being born, the organized play director Chris Tulak asked for people that wanted to be admins on social media, and so I responded, and I'm one of 6. So there are 3 there's 3 different sections. So there's the resource team, so that's Bill Benham and Greg Marks. There's the content team, which is Travis Whittle and Claire Hoffman, and then the social team, the community team, which is myself and Alan Patrick.
Oh, awesome. And which goes right along with how much 5e has really been thrown back to the community. You guys are giving input to make the future products better, and and I feel like too, like when you're like, well, I kind of feel like I'm towing the line because they dropped a new thing and that's like my favorite thing.
Yeah.
But in a sense too, like you're getting to get feedback. The fans are the fans and the community is giving feedback. So I really feel like with each thing they've put out, it's gotten better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And also the properties or the adventures that Wizards of the Coast has actually written themselves are actually better than the ones they've outsourced.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree.
So hopefully they keep doing more and more things in-house and it keeps growing, because I'm definitely enjoying what's the fruits of those labors.
Yeah, and I love the way that D&D has grown, not just as the role-playing game, but you know, the whole community, like you said, but the community of like, now that we have, you know, a bunch of Twitch streamers, and you know, the movies might be coming out, hopefully, hopefully, and like the board games and the video games, like all these things are growing the just kind of the brand as a whole. But that help, you know, that makes it more fun, because then it's sort of, you know, everywhere.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed watching the business of D&D grow. You know, as someone who kind of like impacts, you know, and just watching role playing companies in general and how they move forward in 2017 and into 2018. You know, because you know, when things really got started in the 70s and 80s, you know, those business models don't work anymore.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so I'm always curious to see what, you know, what companies are doing to stay relevant. And Wizards of the Coast, you know, has done such a great job with D&D as entertainment. Like they've seemed to really latched onto that. You know, their presence out at events has been stellar. The ones that I've been to. So I'm really enjoying that aspect of it, and seeing where things go, especially coming from, you know, a gamer that, you know, did a lot of heavy gaming in the 80s, where it was taboo to play role-playing games, especially Dungeons and Dragons.
Definitely.
And now, you know, to see where we are now today, like celebrities are playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm glad to see the whole idea of like the gatekeeper, you know, the nerdy gatekeeper being crushed. I love just seeing more people being brought into the community. You know, some people get upset like, oh, you know, they haven't been here as long as us, and it's like, who cares? The whole point is people are having fun. Like that is the point. That is why we play, not to have something that other people don't have, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, and it's better. It's better for everyone involved, and you know, again, too, it goes back to like the, you know, how many people we see that can't find games to get into, right? Well, you know, the more people we have in this hobby, the more likely you are to find a game to get into.
Right, yeah.
So, so I'm super stoked for the future of Dungeons and Dragons, and not just Dungeons and Dragons, but all tabletop role playing games. Definitely. So we are right around that hour mark. Is there anything you want to leave off with?
Nothing specific, but I mean, if you want to find me, you know, you can find me all over Twitter and Facebook. I usually go up under the name Raddu76, so it's RADDU76. I do work for Fantasy Grounds, so you can, if you have questions about Fantasy Grounds, you can hit me up personally, or via the, you know, any of this Fantasy Grounds social media networks as well. You know, all the Adventures League stuff, all the stuff Doug linked, or David linked in the sorry, I just saw Doug in the chat, but David linked in the video description. Those are usually the places I'm at.
Yeah, I like to put the links down there. It just makes it easier for people.
Yeah.
So you guys just click and stalk Robert all over the interwebs.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for being on and answering our questions about season 7 Adventure League, and a little bit of delving into Dark Sun and all the other things. And guys, remember, Adam Bradford tomorrow, we're gonna have a big giveaway, that legendary bundle, which is pretty expensive. So you're gonna want to tune in for a chance to win that. That you can only get it if you're here live. It'll be in the chat. And I want to thank all you guys for hanging out with me today. Until next time, stay nerdy.
Thanks for having me.